What lurks in the dark alleys, waiting, watching, beyond the reach of reason? And how far would you go if you glimpsed the terrifying truth of things older than time itself? Join Classic Storytime Hub as we unravel He by H.P. Lovecraft, a tale reimagined in English where the boundaries between reality and cosmic terror blur.
I saw him on a sleepless night, wandering through the city as if chasing the remnants of my own sanity. My arrival in New York had been a misstep, a blind leap into streets that promised wonder but delivered only shadows. I had imagined labyrinths of ancient alleys and forgotten squares, where the past whispered between crumbling walls and moonlit waterfronts, and towering modern spires rose like dark monuments under waning moons. What I found instead was a weight, a creeping, suffocating dread that threatened to claim me entirely. At first, the city had seduced me. From a distant bridge at sunset, I had glimpsed it glowing above its waters, peaks and spires unfolding like some impossible floral architecture, brushing against golden clouds and the faint glimmer of early stars. As night fell, the lights flickered on, one by one, across the shimmering tide, lanterns drifting and bowing with the breeze, foghorns moaning in uncanny harmonies. In that moment, the city became a dreamscape, alive with a strange, otherworldly music, echoing the lost grandeur of Carcassonne, Samarkand, El Dorado, cities half forgotten, half legend, all shimmering with impossible promise. Then came my walk through its old veins, narrow, twisting alleys where red brick blinked through rows of tiny windows, and elegant doorways had once welcomed gilded carriages and polished coaches. I thought I had stumbled upon the very essence of beauty I had always sought, treasures that might one day shape me into the poet I longed to become. But even in that fleeting wonder, a chill lingered, the hint of something beyond comprehension, waiting silently to undo me. But the dreams I had carried into the city were not meant to bloom. Daylight tore away the illusion, revealing only grime, alien streets, and the oppressive spread of cold, lifeless stone where moonlight had once whispered of wonder and forgotten magic. The people that crowded the streets were strange and alien, faces hardened, eyes sharp and narrow, souls without dreams, without connection to the world that had drawn me here. To a blue-eyed stranger from the old folk, with memories of green lanes and the white steeples of New England villages etched in his heart, they were utterly incomprehensible. Instead of poetry and inspiration, I found only emptiness, a chill loneliness that sank into my bones. And then I saw it, a terrible truth no one had dared name, a secret that quivers beyond language. This city, this sprawling mass of stone and noise, was not a living continuation of old New York, as London is of old London or Paris of old Paris. No, it was dead, its enormous body preserved imperfectly, crawling with strange animate horrors that had nothing to do with the city as it once breathed and walked. After that revelation, sleep became a fragile thing. Some small solace returned when I learned to avoid the streets by day, wandering only at night, when shadows stirred and what little of the past lingered still drifted ghost-like through the empty avenues. Old white doorways remembered the figures who had once passed through them, and for a while that faint echo of life allowed me to write a few poems. Yet I still avoided returning to my people, afraid that doing so would mark me as defeated, crawling back into the familiar with my dreams broken.
Then, on a sleepless night, I encountered him. It happened in a shadowed, almost grotesque courtyard tucked away in Greenwich, a section I had chosen in naive hope of finding the poets and artists I so longed to know. The old lanes, the weathered houses, the tiny hidden squares, they charmed me endlessly.
When I discovered the artists and poets themselves to be loud, hollow pretenders, their lives a contradiction of the beauty they claimed to pursue, I stayed, not for them, but for the memory of what this place had once been. I imagined Greenwich in its prime, a tranquil village untouched by the ever-growing city. In the early hours before dawn, when the revelers had vanished into the night, I wandered alone through the twisting passages, peering into forgotten corners, lingering over secrets that generations had left behind. These walks fed my soul, sparking the visions and whispered dreams that the poet within me had longed for. It was around 2 o'clock on a cloudy August morning when he appeared, emerging from a labyrinth of courtyards that now could only be reached through dark, unlit hallways. Once, these alleys had formed a continuous network, picturesque and alive. Today, they were erased from maps, known only through rumor, but their obscurity made them all the more precious to me. As I moved deeper into these hidden spaces, a thrill surged through me. The layout suggested that these were merely fragments of a far greater network, shadowy counterparts tucked behind high, blank walls, or concealed in lampless archways, invisible to the foreign crowds and ignored by the indifferent artists whose lives were deliberately secluded. And it was here, in this silent, half-forgotten maze, that he came upon me, an intruder of sorts, yet somehow perfectly at home in the darkness. He spoke to me without a word of invitation, his eyes tracing my movements as I lingered before weathered doorways, iron-railed steps glinting faintly in the sickly glow of overhead transoms. Shadows cloaked his face, and a wide-brimmed hat merged seamlessly with an old-fashioned cloak, giving him the appearance of someone who had stepped out of another age. Even before he addressed me, a subtle unease crawled along my spine. He was thin, almost cadaverously so, and his voice, when it came, was soft, hollow, and strangely detached, yet carried a precision that drew my attention instantly. "I've noticed you," he said, "wandering these alleys more than once. You share a taste that most overlook, the love of what remains from days long past. Perhaps you would welcome the guidance of one well practiced in such explorations. Someone's knowledge reaches farther than that of any obvious newcomer." A flicker of light from a lone attic window revealed his face, a noble, even handsome visage, refined beyond what I expected of this forgotten quarter. Yet something about it unsettled me. Perhaps it was the pallor, or the almost inhuman stillness of his expression. Perhaps it was how wholly out of place he seemed. Still, I followed. In those grim, quiet nights, my pursuit of antiquity, beauty, and forgotten mysteries was all I had to sustain me. To meet another so steeped in the shadows of history felt like a rare gift, almost fate itself offering its hand. For over an hour, the cloaked man led me wordlessly through the darkness, speaking only in hushed fragments about names long vanished, dates lost to memory, and the subtle transformations of the city. He guided me mostly with gestures as we squeezed through hidden gaps, tiptoed across narrow corridors, climbed over walls slick with age, and once crawled on hands and knees through a low arched stone passage so long and convoluted that I lost all sense of place. By the time we emerged, every familiar landmark had vanished, leaving me suspended in a maze that seemed governed by a will older and stranger than my own. The things we passed were ancient, marvelous, or at least they seemed so under the few scattered rays of light that reached me. I will never forget the tottering Ionic columns, the fluted pilasters, the urn-topped iron fence posts, the windows crowned with flaring lintels, and the delicate fanlights, all of them growing stranger, more otherworldly, the deeper we delved into this endless maze of forgotten antiquity. We encountered no one. As we moved onward, the glowing windows thinned until the oil-lit street lamps of the first alleys gave way to flickering candlelight, and finally we reached a court so dark it seemed to swallow all light. My guide's gloved hand steadied me as he led me blindly through the blackness to a narrow wooden gate set into a high wall. Beyond it, an alley appeared, lit only by tin lanterns placed in front of every seventh house, colonial relics with conical tops, perforated with tiny holes that let a trembling light escape. The alley climbed steeply, impossibly steep for this part of the city, ending abruptly at the ivy-covered wall of a private estate. Beyond, the pale cupola of a distant building rose above waving treetops against a faintly luminous sky. In the wall was a small, low-arched gate of black oak, studded with nails. The man produced a massive key, unlocked it, and led me within. We stepped into a darkness so complete it seemed to absorb all sound. A foul, centuries-old mustiness rose to greet us, so potent it made me feel faint, a pungent perfume of decay and forgotten time. Yet my host seemed utterly indifferent. Silently I followed him as he guided me up a curving stairway, across a shadowed hall, and into a room whose door he quietly locked behind us, sealing us off from the world I had known. Then I watched him draw back the curtains of the 3 tiny multi-paned windows, barely visible against the softening dawn. He crossed to the mantel, flicked flint and steel, and lit 2 candles from a 12-sconce candelabrum, then gestured for silence, his motion delicate yet commanding. In the flickering light, I saw that we stood in a vast paneled library dating back to the early 18th century. The room was breathtaking. Doorway pediments of perfect proportion, a Doric cornice running along the ceiling, and an overmantel carved with elegant scrolls and urns. The walls were lined with shelves, crammed with books, and in between family portraits peered from their frames, their varnish dimmed to a ghostly haze. Each bore a striking resemblance to my host, who now motioned me to a chair beside a graceful Chippendale table. Before seating himself, he paused, a fleeting shadow of hesitation crossing his face. Slowly he removed his gloves, wide-brimmed hat and cloak, revealing the full elegance of a mid-Georgian costume, queued hair, neck ruffles, knee breeches, silk stockings, and the buckled shoes I had not noticed before. He sank into a lyre-back chair with deliberate grace, his eyes fixed on me, intense and unblinking. Without his hat, his age suddenly became apparent, the mark of a longevity so subtle I had not noticed before, a quiet source of the unease I had felt since first seeing him. When he spoke, his voice was soft, hollow, and carefully muted, sometimes quivering in a way that made me lean in closer, caught between fascination and a growing half-forbidden alarm. "You see before you," he said, "a man of extremely eccentric habits, whose choice of dress requires no apology to one of your wit and taste." Reflecting on times long past, he admitted he had freely studied the customs and dress of earlier ages, adopting their ways without ostentation, a harmless indulgence, he said, for those with the wit to appreciate it. He had been fortunate enough to retain his family's ancestral estate, swallowed over the years by the encroaching sprawl of Greenwich after 1800, and later New York around 1830. This estate had long been jealously preserved, its history entwined with obligations his family had faithfully maintained.
The squire, who inherited it in 1768, had pursued certain arcane arts and made discoveries deeply tied to the peculiar energies of this very plot of ground, secrets demanding vigilant protection. Now, he said, he intended to reveal some of these effects to me under the strictest secrecy, trusting that my curiosity and loyalty would not betray him. I could only nod, a mixture of alarm and fascination tightening my chest. The daylight streets of New York had always felt deadly to me, oppressive in their noise and alien crowds. Whether this man was a harmless eccentric or a master of dangerous arcane arts mattered little. I had no choice but to follow, to quench my hunger for wonder wherever he might lead me. My ancestor, he whispered, discovered astonishing qualities in the human will, forces seldom suspected, capable not only of shaping one's own deeds and influencing others, but of controlling the very elements and even dimensions that seem to stretch beyond nature herself. He defied the sanctity of space and time and applied rituals once practiced by certain mixed-blood tribes of Red Indians who had camped upon this hill in ways most extraordinary and unimagined. These Indians, he continued, were fiery-tempered when the estate was built and a constant nuisance, insisting on wandering the grounds at every full moon. For years they would slip over the walls under cover of darkness, performing secretive rites and ceremonies. In 1768, the new squire caught them in the act and froze, utterly astonished at what he saw. Afterward, he made a pact. They could continue their rituals, but only if he learned their methods fully. He discovered that their ancestors had passed down these customs from a mix of Red Indian and Old Dutch traditions dating back to the time of the States General. And, I fear, he added with a grim chuckle, the squire may have gotten them monstrously drunk on rum, intentionally or not, for a full week after learning their secret. From that moment, he was the only living soul who knew the truth. And now, sir, you are the first outsider to hear of it. Were it not for your feverish curiosity for bygone things, I would never have risked such disclosure of the powers. I shuddered at the ease of his storytelling, the colloquial tones of a bygone age brushing against me like a ghost. Yet he pressed on, and I could not look away. "But you must understand, sir," he said softly, "what the squire learned from those mixed-blood tribes was only a fraction of his knowledge. He had studied at Oxford, conversed with an old alchemist and astrologer in Paris, and came to see that the world itself is but smoke, shaped by intellect. Beyond the reach of the vulgar, yet under the control of the wise, it can be drawn in and puffed out like the finest Virginia tobacco. What we desire, we can conjure around us. What we reject, we can sweep away. I do not claim this is literally true in every sense, but it is enough to produce astonishing displays now and then. You, I believe, will be thrilled to glimpse a more vivid reality than your imagination alone could provide. Come to the window and remain quiet."
My host took my hand and drew me toward one of the two windows along the long side of the musty, oppressive room. The instant his ungloved fingers brushed mine, a chill shot through me. His flesh was dry and firm, yet colder than ice, and I almost recoiled. Still, the emptiness and horror of the waking city pressed upon me, and I steeled myself, willing to follow wherever he led. At the window, he pulled back the yellow silk curtains, revealing the blackness outside. At first, I saw nothing but a scattering of tiny twinkling lights far in the distance. Then, with a subtle, almost imperceptible motion of his hand, a flash of heat lightning illuminated the scene. A sea of lush, untamed foliage stretched before me, untouched and wild, in stark contrast to the grid of roofs I expected. To my right, the Hudson gleamed with a wicked brilliance, and beyond, a vast salt marsh shimmered unnaturally, dotted with fireflies that twitched like living sparks. The flash faded, and his waxy, ancient face curled into a malevolent smile. "That," he said softly, "was before my time, before the new squire's time. Let us try again." I felt faint, even more so than the oppressive modernity of the city had made me. "Good God," I whispered, "can you do that for any time?" He nodded, baring the blackened stumps of what had once been yellow teeth. I clutched at the curtains to steady myself, but his ice-cold hand gripped mine, holding me firm. With another insidious gesture, he summoned the vision again. The lightning flashed, and this time the scene felt almost familiar. It was Greenwich as it once had been. Green lanes and fields stretched between scattered houses, patches of common grass glinting in the muted light. Here and there a roof rose among the greenery, a faint echo of the present, but the past lingered, alive and vivid before my eyes. Beyond the marsh, I glimpsed the steeples of old New York, Trinity, St. Paul's, and the brick church towering over the rest, shrouded in a thin haze of wood smoke that lingered across the city. My chest heaved, not from the sight alone, but from the terrifying possibilities my imagination dared to conjure. Dare you go farther?" I whispered, all lacing my voice. For a fleeting moment I thought he shared it, but the cruel grin returned, chilling and knowing. "Far," he hissed. "What I have seen would turn you into a statue of stone. Back, back, forward, forward. Look, ye trembling fool." With a sharp, almost malicious gesture, the sky erupted in a blinding flash. For 3 heart-stopping seconds, I beheld a vision that would haunt my dreams forever. The heavens swarmed with grotesque winged creatures, and below sprawled a blackened city of monstrous stone terraces. Pyramids rose like savage monuments to the moon, and devil lights flickered from uncountable windows. On aerial galleries, yellow-eyed people danced in a frenzied madness, clad in garish robes of orange and red. Their movements were driven by the pounding of fevered kettle drums, the clattering of obscene crotala, and the unending wailing moans of muted horns, whose dirges rolled and swelled like waves over a cursed, bitumen-black ocean. I saw it all, the nightmare city, its horrors beyond comprehension, and heard, as if through the mind itself, the deafening, blasphemous cacophony that filled the air. It was the realization of every fear that city had ever stirred in me. Every warning to remain silent was lost as my nerves shattered. I screamed, a raw, primal cry, over and over, until the walls themselves seemed to quiver with my terror. As the lightning flash faded, I saw that my host was trembling as well. A look of pure, shocking fear had half erased the serpentine fury that my screams had provoked. He tottered, clutching the curtains as I had, his head jerking wildly like some hunted animal. God alone knows he had reason. Through the fading echoes of my cries came another sound, so unholy that only a numbed, paralyzed awareness kept me from losing consciousness. It was the slow, deliberate creak of stairs beyond the locked door, the quiet shuffle of moccasined feet, or something worse, and at last the soft but resolute jangle of a brass latch, glowing dimly in the candlelight. The old man lunged at me through the moldy air, clawing and spitting, his voice a strangled bark of curses and fear. "The full moon, damn you! You've called them, and they've come for me. Moccasined feet, dead men. Gad sink you, red devils, I poisoned no rum for you. Haven't I guarded your pox-ridden magic? You drank yourselves sick, and now blame the squire. Let go, unhand that latch, there's nothing here for you. 3 deliberate, measured raps shook the panels of the door. Foam gathered at the magician's mouth, his fright curdling into steel-edged despair. Yet even as panic consumed him, rage flared anew, and he staggered toward the table where I clung for balance. Still clutching the curtain in one hand, the other clawing toward me, he stumbled violently, and the curtains tore free from their high fastenings. Moonlight, full, cold, and blinding, flooded the room, spilling over the twisted, moldy panels and illuminating the terror in his face. In the greenish glow of the moonlight, the feeble candles seemed to vanish, and a fresh wave of decay spread through the room, through the musk-filled air, the worm-eaten paneling, the sagging floorboards, the battered mantel, the rickety furniture, and the tattered draperies. The corruption spread over the old man as well, whether born of the same unnatural source or the terror he radiated, and I watched in horrified fascination as he shriveled, blackened, and lurched toward me, claws extended like a vulture striking its prey. Only his eyes remained whole, blazing with a fierce, molten light that seemed to grow as the rest of his face charred and dwindled to nothing. The rapping at the door grew louder, more insistent, now echoing with the harsh ring of metal. The blackened horror before me had shrunk to little more than a floating head, eyes blazing with spite, wriggling impotently across the floor and emitting small venomous spits of immortal malice. Then the door itself shattered under a series of brutal blows. I glimpsed the gleam of a tomahawk cleaving wood, and a flood of inky, amorphous darkness poured into the room. It flowed like oil bursting through a rotten bulkhead, overturning chairs, creeping under the table, and spreading toward the blackened, glaring head. The darkness engulfed it completely, swallowing the terrible eyes, then began to recede, carrying away its invisible, sinister burden. The inky tide flowed out the shattered doorway, down the stairs, which groaned and creaked in reverse, as though the house itself exhaled. At last the floor beneath me gave way. I plunged into the shadowed chamber below, choking on cobwebs, gasping for air, half fainting with terror, the night pressing in from every direction.
The green moon poured its sickly light through the shattered windows, revealing the whole door ajar. As I rose from the plaster-strewn floor, twisting myself free from the sagging ceiling, an overwhelming wave of darkness swept past the doorway. Scores of baleful eyes glimmered in its mass, a living tide of blackness searching for the cellar door, and once it found it, it vanished, swallowed by the shadows below. The floor beneath me shuddered, giving way as it had in the upper chamber. A crash echoed above, and I glimpsed something, perhaps the cupola, tumble past the broken west window. Momentarily freed from the wreckage, I bolted for the front door, only to find it jammed. In desperation, I seized a chair, smashed a window, and climbed out into the moonlit chaos. The lawn stretched before me, overgrown and wild, grass and weeds reaching yard-high, moonlight dancing across the tangled mess. The surrounding walls loomed impossibly high, gates locked and unyielding. But a pile of boxes in the corner gave me leverage. I scrambled atop them, clinging to a great stone urn for dear life. Around me, I could make out only broken walls, shuttered windows, and old gabled roofs. The steep street I had ascended was nowhere to be seen, swallowed rapidly by a mist rolling in from the river, despite the glaring moonlight. Then the urn trembled beneath my hands, echoing my dizzy terror.
and in an instant my body plunged into the unknown, free-falling into fate itself. The man who found me later said I must have crawled a long distance despite my shattered bones. A trail of blood marked the route I had taken, vanishing soon under the gathering rain. Beyond that, no trace remained. Reports could only say that I had appeared mysteriously at the entrance to a small black court off Perry Street. I never returned to those shadowed labyrinths, nor would I send any sane soul there. What ancient, unfathomable being I had encountered, I cannot say. I only know that the city is dead, a sprawling tomb of hidden horrors. As for him, I do not know where he went. I returned instead to the pure, calm lanes of New England, where the evening sea winds sweep fragrant and unthreatening through the trees, and I vowed never to chase the past again.
And thus the story ended. If you liked this journey into the worlds of classic literature, do not forget to support us by subscribing so we can tell you more. And hey, if there's a classic tale you'd love to hear told in this suspenseful style, drop its name in the comments below. Your suggestion might be our next chilling adventure.